Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to call the City of Homestead City Council Budget Workshop to order. Today is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, and it is 5:05 p.m. Could you please call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Councilman Cannibal.
Here.
Councilman Ross.
Here.
Councilman Davis.
Here.
Councilwoman Avila. Here. Vice Mayor Fletcher.
Here.
Mayor Lawson.
Here. All right. It's that time of year. We have before us, let's have one, a discussion innocuously titled, Budget Workshop Presentation, bar number 4358. Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor, and also my professional colleagues and members of the public. Today, we start off with the budgeting session with a workshop, something that is novel, something that is new, something that allows us the privilege of taking a deeper dive as to the proposal for the next fiscal year 2025. First of all, start off with an introduction that the administration is proposing to have a council workshop to review the IDEW status. Just several weeks ago, we received notification from PERC regarding the status of the city's IDEW, and the city followed up with a petition to seeking direction and guidance from the state as to the status of the IDEW with the city. That response came back 2 weeks ago without being definitive, clearly stating that there is a pending litigation against the state from various unions around the state, that the state is unable to render an opinion as to the status of the city's IDEW. So we are asking that we will schedule a special session with the city attorney and the council to go into details as to the letter that we received from the state. And also, I propose as a follow-up to this workshop to have a personalized individual briefings with each elected official to go into further details. I don't presume to think that this evening will be enough timeline for any one individual to get a good grasp as to what we propose. So I would like folks to digest the presentation today, and we come back to individual council members and take a deeper dive for you guys to give us further guidance. The presentation tonight is going to revolve entirely about the general fund and capital improvements. The CRA budget will follow subsequent to this. Unfortunately, our interim city director for CRA is, I think he's bereaved. He left the city yesterday to go back to Michigan. And also the assistant director is indisposed as we speak. I think she's probably here. Leslie here?
Yeah, she's there.
Yeah, I think I was speaking to her earlier. So she's under the mask. So she's not feeling well. So I will defer the CRA project presentation as well. Let me start off by, again, acknowledging the valuable contributions of my colleagues on the administration side. It's been 4 months of tedious, painstaking efforts to embrace process improvements, to propose new ways of doing old things, and also to roll out new programs. The city administration, with my assumption of office, was saddled with responsibility of resolving a very major challenge that I have called to be the city's priority number 1, which is the sanitary sewer moratorium. As we go along with capital improvement from the private sector, we were saddled with the responsibility to find a solution to an imposition of a consent decree by Miami-Dade County Durham that no new development will be allowed to connect to certain sanitary sewer wastewater basins in the city. There were a whole slew of them. We have worked very, very carefully within the timeline and successfully, as we speak today, pulled 2 major basins, wastewater treatment plants, basins and pump stations out of the moratorium. That's pump station number 46 and pump station number 15 with the associated wastewater collection systems. They are now back to active temporary moratorium status, which means new development can actually seek building permits and obtain building permits within those pump stations.
As of today?
As of a couple of weeks ago. Pump station number 22 is the major pump station with a large basin, which is the one that has posed the greatest amount of challenge to the city. We are working strenuously to bring an item to council. I believe it should be, if not at the next council meeting, it should be the first meeting in September, to bring in an emergency legislation as well as a contract that will address pump station number 22. Why pump station number 22 is critical is because there are close to 7 additional basins of pump stations that tie into pump station number 22. So there is a dynamic effect, a dynamo. As once you fix pump station number 22, all the other pump stations get resolved. And that will be a huge relief to the city. We've imposed an internal deadline on ourselves that pump station and the associated pump stations and their basins will be fixed by December of 2024. We've already identified a pathway, and we intend to have an expedited delivery method with a contractor working around the clock to get our pump station back to service. Upon assumption of office as the city manager back on March 25th, working in concert with my colleagues, we rolled out an interdepartmental task force to tackle quality of life issues, primarily illegal dumping and associated slum and blight issues. And to date, working with police department, public works, parks and recreation, code compliance, solid waste, and of course our very valuable PIO, the city has secured 474 illegal dumping citations have been issued. 108 overgrown lot citations were also issued. 4 felony arrests were made by the police department, thank you, Chief, as well as 12 misdemeanor arrests, and 9 vehicles have been impounded. About a week ago, the city was given custody or ownership rights over one of the vehicles through a forfeiture hearing. Another important factor to consider is that upon assumption of office, we rolled out a new procurement method called job order contracting, where we canceled already procured 3 minor or rather medium-sized contracts and repeat them under the job order contracting process that allows us to take advantage of a count of nationwide procurement method that netted the city of Homestead additional savings of $411,000 in savings. And what we propose to do in this budget as we go along is to propose to have the savings of $411,000 proffered into new capital improvement projects, not in operating items, but capital improvement, so that as we make these savings, we'll continue to demonstrate that process improvement has an advantage to it in terms of capital improvement. Those projects that we were able to rebid were William Dickinson Center roof replacement. We got a savings of $125,000. JD Red Park roof replacement, we got a savings of $70,000. And for the CRA Crow Marketplace roof, we got a savings of $216,000. So in a nutshell, what this means in elementary terms is that we would have lost those monies if we had proceeded with the contract that had already been paid. By stopping it from council from awarding the contract, we were able to net this service. And one major promise I made, and I keep making to staff, this is our basic minimum. Contracts must be judiciously procured, and there must be savings accruing to the city. As of August of 2024, we've successfully obtained about 4 grants totaling $1.1 million. In the electric sector, we have $132,000 EECBG. The urban forest was $755,000. The Safe Street for All, $200,000 grants. And the historical resources for Seminole Theater was $107,000. We have completed 16 grant applications to date between March and today, with a total value of about $18 million, $18.9 million. We're praying and hoping while we work with our lobbyists to see whether how much of that $18.9 million we'll be able to pull in. Again, this is one of those great initiatives we are committed to see how we can leverage OPM, which is federal funds or state funds, to procure and perhaps see to the conclusion and completion of citywide capital improvement projects. In the pipeline, we've already earmarked the processes of grant applications for additional grant opportunities totaling about $20 million. So we hope and we believe that continuing the trend that we are maintaining will be successful. And that actually is the platform why we want to create a new Office of Grants Management in the city, something that has never been done here before, to centralize, standardize, and make uniform the processes leading to grant applications, grant management, and grant compliance audits. So it's so that when anyone comes in here, we don't have to battle ourselves. We have to remain focused that there is a process in place. The protocol has been tested and it's been found compliant in terms of compliance audits. Some of those grants have to do with environmental and climate justice, CRA Homestead Rising, and Trail Go programming. These are some of the new programs that we tend to find that will be able to secure funding. There are also 4 additional grants totaling $1.7 million that we've already received preliminary notification from the federal government that the city has been earmarked and identified to receive. So we are waiting on the concerted effort of our lobbyists in Tallahassee and also in Washington, D.C., working in concert with Congressman Jimenez to see how we can finalize those grant applications. We hope and we believe that those grant applications will be finalized in the next few months because they are tied to 2 major projects in the city that has to do with the wastewater compliance of the consent decree. Now, to development services. The city of Homestead is lacking in some of the basic templates for seeing to the conclusion of our development services group. Some of those are basic templates that we are working with development services folks as well as public works and water and sewer. And also electric. We propose to have a comprehensive infrastructure master plan for the city of Homestead, something that the city has been lacking for, which is the basis of the new budget. This budget is actually what I consider a baseline budget. That next fiscal year, you will see that all the templates are in place. We're not going to be going after department directors asking to create something out of the blues. Now we will have a template in place. A master plan for the city's infrastructure will identify the gaps, the deficiencies, and the missing links. There are several locations in the city of Homestead that are lacking on basic minimum standards of water and sewer infrastructure. The minimum pipe size for residential locations is 8-inch water pipe. Several places in the city have 1-inch pipes servicing them. So we want to leverage our ability to go into the 21st century by bringing everybody up to minimum standards at least. So we've identified consultants and vendors that will address the water and sewer master plan, the transportation master plan, and the stormwater master plan. The 3 of those master plans will work together to constitute an infrastructure master plan for the city of Homestead. That we tend to complete before the moratorium, the building moratorium imposed by councils is lifted. So we've given each of the vendors a timeline. We know that we have roughly about 9 months to 10 months in the moratorium. So we hope to finalize these plans before we come back to council. So that before you lift the moratorium, we've established the baseline of the city's infrastructure. If you're coming in, you have to know this is what is existing, this is what the master plan calls for. If you want to build, it's obligatory on you to work with us to bring all the master plans to standards to service your location. And also, one thing that we're missing in the city of Homestead is a pavement management system, which is a platform established by a vendor that we're hiring to establish what is the condition assessment of our roadways, sidewalks. What are the locations where our sidewalks are missing? The standard sidewalk size is 3 feet wide for ADA compliance. In no city that I know of does that these days. Everyone has gone up to 5 feet wide sidewalks. So we want to establish those minimum standards again for best practices in the city of Homestead. So we are also implementing a citywide permitting and electronic plans review solution. What is that? It means that we're able to centralize our permitting processes, that even council members can go on their computers and use a dashboard to know the status of a permit application, using 2 things, either the address or the folio number, or under the extreme circumstances, if you have the process number of the applicant, you should be able to see it yourself. That allows for visibility, it allows for transparency. Everywhere I've known, this is the minimum standards for permitting section. So this is something that I've tasked my assistant city manager, Kima Brand, to champion. So we hope to roll this out by the middle of the fiscal year. So these are some of the great initiatives. We are also proposing, as we said in our upper front presentation, that the Cyberarium interior infrastructure upgrade should happen this fiscal year in order for us to be able to rent it out and generate additional revenue. So back in July, early July, the state of Florida designated the greater Homestead area as a space sport region. We've already commenced discussion with the state Florida Spaceport Administration Group, the Space Florida. We had an inaugural meeting. And something I must be proud to say, that the Space Florida had actually admitted publicly that Miami-Dade County or no other entity had reached out to them yet, except the city of Homestead. And they made a lot of recommendations to us with proffers that is beneficial to the city of Homestead. And I've personally reached out to Miami-Dade County Office of Innovation and Economic Development in the mayor's office to kickstart a county-wide Homestead Spaceport platform where we can get together to establish what we are told is the minimum requirement, a master plan for Homestead Spaceport. And what that does is that it allows us to... Is it time for me to start? What the county-wide platform is going to enable us to do is to have a multi-party platform of Miami-Dade County, City of Homestead, the Homestead Air Reserve Base, and the industry group to be part of the stakeholders to establish what the minimum standards of the master plan for the Homestead Spaceport and leverage available resources and funding from the state. The state is willing to fund the preparation and development of the Homestead Spaceport. So it's not going to, if you look at our budget, there's no allocation for us to spend city funds for this because we've been assured by the state that it's something that they can fund. So, and also we met with the EDC. So I'm going to come back to council at some point in the next couple of weeks, at the next meeting preferably, or the meeting in September, to ask for a resolution of support for the EDC to be part of the group of the Homestead Regional Spaceport platform. As a follow-up to the current budget that we have in fiscal 24, we've rolled out a standalone code compliance department and hired a new director. And also there's a reorganization being proposed in the new budget for Parks and Recreation. What does that mean? It means that we're taking out of Parks and Recreation certain responsibilities and functions that has nothing to do with Parks and Recreation, which was located and housed in that department. And they were never given any resources to champion that. For example, facilities management, asset management, maintenance of buildings. That's nothing to do with parks. So I look at my colleagues in Parks and Recreation, and I feel really concerned that these guys are being set up to fail. So what do we do? What is the solution? We create a standalone facilities department that will roll over fleet management, asset management, and all that good stuff, so that Seminole Theater, City Hall, and other city assets and infrastructure can be housed under one roof with proper professionals that can address this. But a month ago, the air conditioning in this building went off. Who was responsible for restoration of the AC system? Parks and Recreation. That's totally unfair on them. These are people that are professionally trained and set up to handle programming in parks and not asset management. So I want to create that relief for our friends in Parks and Recreation by creating a new department that is dedicated for that. And we'll also redesignate the name of the department to be Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces, just like the county has it, which is PROS for short. What does that mean? It means that the plaza in front of City Hall here is under the Parks and Recreation. The building itself is under the Asset Management Group. So we're now putting square pegs, or rather round pegs in round holes, which is a good fit for process improvement. And we're also going to rename finance to finance and budgeting by creating a new division in finance department that has to do with budgeting, so that we don't have to wait until the county did what they did to us this year by throwing a curveball. And by the way, Homestead is the only city that can happen to, where the county gave us a number to work with only to renege after the council had already set the millage rate to tell us that that was a wrong number. So we'll be creating a new department of pros, or rather redesignation, a new department of general services that will be responsible for asset management, fleet management, and facilities maintenance, and also implementing, for the first time, city's strategic plan by having a strategic retreat to be championed and corralled by a professional, where we have to establish citywide strategic initiatives and milestones and present to council for consideration and adoption. That is the basis of budgeting. Anywhere you go, which was one of the very first documents I asked for when I got here, can I see the city's strategic plan? And there was none. Then how do you build a budget? We ask folks what they need, but that's not how you. Council needs to be working with concert with the administration to create a template of strategic roadmap that will see the city where you want to see the city in the next 5 years. And we tie a budget to meet those milestones, and that's called the visioning of the city's administration. So we want to refocus with the core mandates, and those new departments will be information and technology is being redesignated to innovation and technology, finance to finance and budget, procurement and fleet management to procurement, parks and recreation to pros, in order to be able to create the strategic plan. Then comes the city's legislative priorities. We will work in concert to start early, to work with council. This is not an administration's purview. Council needs to provide leadership, provide guidance, and participate in developing and preparing a city-wide legislative priorities that will be handed over to our lobbyists as well as to the legislative group of South Bay. That when you go to Tallahassee or you go to Washington, D.C., these are the elements, these are the missions, these are the core values of what Homestead wants you guys to champion. So we will be doing that coming in the next fiscal year. There are certain other, what I call miscellaneous changes that will help us to achieve process improvement in the city, such as the Development Services Department, as well as the city's City Attorney's Office, which you will see as we roll out the presentation shortly. We are also proposing some of the major capital improvement programming to see how we can work with the CRA to do what the CRA does best in other cities, which is to participate in capital improvement, especially within the CRA area. As a matter of fact, most of the undersized water mains we found in the city were in the old section of the city. And a good chunk of that area is within the CRA. So in addressing slum and blight, you will not be able to have businesses relocate into the CRA if you have undersized infrastructure there. So these are some of the initiatives we'll talk to the CRA folks, and they're willing to champion with us. At this point, let me hand over to my colleague, the Finance Director, to give us a rundown of the proposed budget in comparison with the current fiscal year 24 budget allocations, so that we can see apples to apples as we take a deeper dive. Before we start, I assume that Council is comfortable and familiar with what happened between the city and Miami-Dade County in terms of the millage rate setting and how we were advised to make provisions in our budget for what I consider a check that the county will issue to us, which we will never cash. So give us a check, and what we do is budget for it and expense it out again. It is not fiscal money. It's the proverbial 19.7% growth in property value that the county came back about a month or so after the fact and told us, oops, we made a mistake. It's not actually 19.7, it's about 12 points. So that translates to $2.4 million in revenue loss that we're not going to see. But by that time, we've already gone so far in our budget cycle that there was no way we could go back and start afresh. So we went ahead and prepared the budget plus the $2.4 million, but at the bottom, expense it out because it's not going to come in here. So we zeroed it out. So I just want to call attention to that before you see that on the screen. Okay, Carlos.
Okay, the overall budget for all the funds is $272,348,000 again proposed. Just to keep in mind, the budget, the adopted budget, does not include the ARPA fund, does not include Fund 120, which we call the Sundries Grant Fund, or CDBG. And the reason for those is those don't follow the annual budget adoption. They follow their own deadlines as far as when the start date of a grant is or the end date of a grant. So therefore, those are not included as part of this budget, even though you will see in the CIP, there are several CIP projects that are funded with ARPA funds. As the manager stated, $2.4 million. When we budget and when we advertise, we have to advertise based on what the PR 420s, which is what we had to certify based on the millage rate that we adopted in mid-July. We have to advertise on those revenues based on the values that we certified. Knowing what we know from the county, those are going to change. We've already calculated based on those numbers what that potential loss is. The manager said it's $2.4 million. So what we did is we developed this budget. We knew that we couldn't spend that money. So even though it's in the revenue, we isolated it, and as we developed the budget, that was put in the contingency account, not the expense or development the budget. This budget is based on a millage rate of 6.0206, which is the existing rate. I know that there's an appetite for council to reduce the millage rate, and we'll get to that towards the end of the presentation. Other increases to note is for the water and sewer rates, we are increasing it basically by 4.313%, and that's a combination of two things. The CPI adjustment of 4.57, and then what we call the MDC, WASA pass-through of 0.2613%. What we do is we wait for what the county comes up with their rates to us, their increases. What they actually did is they increased the water rate by 13.6%. They decreased the wastewater rate by 3.35%. But both of our expenses are with wastewater, so that's why the net increase to the rates is not as significant. It's only 0.2613%. Also, the other increase is for solid waste rates. I don't know if you remember last year when we approved an increase of 32% for residential and 35% for commercial. We also approved that we would index the rate to the CPI, and every year we would increase it automatically without having to come back to council. The water and sewer rates, we will be coming back to council because by state statute, we have to do a public hearing and announce that that will be one of the agenda items that we have the hearing on September the 3rd. Just an overview of the last year's adopted budget to this one based on the type of funds. Just a couple of things to highlight. Special revenue, what does that include? That includes impact fees, it includes the CRA, and it includes the PTP. And the reason for the big increase is that with both PTP and CRA, whenever you have unused funds, those get reappropriated into the next year so that they can be spent. So that's part of why you have such a big increase in those, and you'll see it as we get into the more specifics for each fund. Debt service, this includes basically the three, the debt service funds for the HERO fund, which is the CRA loan. It includes the GEO bond. It includes the PTP bond, and it also includes Fund 477, which is for the CRA. So, I mean, for the electric utility. So part of the increase is basically for the new bank loan that we will be coming to you probably in about 2 weeks to approve. Capital projects includes included in 2024, this is important, included the Homestead station, it included the CIP fund, and included the librarian. And the reason that you see that big dip is because the Homestead station is no longer there. And if you recall, we received $5.7 million from the county, which was basically used to give back to all the funds. Like we gave $1.7 million back to PTP, and basically we also used $2.8 million to the CIP fund, the Capital Improvement Fund, to fund a lot of the requests the general fund had. So you it looks like it's kind of in both places, but that's part of the reason why you see it in 24 and you don't see it in 25 and 25. It's predominantly just the Fund 397 and the CIP fund. Enterprise funds, Part of the reason for the decline, or one of the reasons for the decline, is I know purchase power costs went down about $1.6 million. And then the internal service funds, those include health, property insurance, workers' comp, customer service, and fleet. And those pretty much remain kind of the same. It's just a reminder that the major revenue sources for the city is the ad valorem revenues, which by law we have to budget at 95%. Part of the reason is anybody can take advantage of the discount which will extend in November, and also with the value adjustment board, we may get reductions, so that's why by law we have to budget at 95% of whatever it normally would be. Other major revenues that the city has, it has on sales tax, state share revenue, communication service tax, and the LOGT, which is the local option gas tax. Those are predominantly going to only be used in the street for transportation type costs. This is just an overview of the general fund by type of costs. You can see personnel costs make the bulk of the operating budget. Capital outlays basically pretty much remain the same. Again, that's mostly for streets, which is funded by the local option gas tax. Debt service, the reason that this one went up is, and Mayor, I know that that's 667, that's for the new city hall loan, so you're thinking, what went up? GASB, which is the Government Accounting Standards Board, made a change treatment, came out with GASB 87. By law, something that before was not treated as a debt service has to now be reported as a debt service. It has to do with the new market tax credit and the quality fee. So therefore, that's why you see the increase. Otherwise, the debt service remains the same. So, other just includes other interfund transfers. For instance, the $400,000 transfer that we transferred to the PPP to help pay for the debt service on the PPP loan. And not that you can see that up there, but basically this is outlining the major sources of revenues, and over the years you can see there's been increases. Some of them decline a little bit, but again, the municipal revenue sharing is one of the most significant, as well as one thing to point out is the franchise fees. If you notice that one went up, that's basically because of the FP&L franchise fees for the annexed areas. For years, we were not getting that because the county was getting that portion of it when that agreement ended. Now we're benefiting that from that, and that was a significant amount of increase this year. $1.2 million. Any questions on that? Okay. Again, just based on the millage rate of 6.0206, this is just showing the comparison. Again, this number, the revenues that are showing here are based on what we received on July 1st. At 95%, that would be $34,668,889. That's both the city's portion and the CRA's portion. Compared to last year's, which was $28 million, the difference is basically 5.7 in additional revenues to the city, which represents 19.7%. The truth will be is that the increase based on the real values, the revenues would be $32,242,305, and that would be an increase of $3,283,350, which is really like 11.3% difference. So you can see the delta between the values that they gave us and what the true values are going to be, and what that does and impacts the budget. It's just a history of the city's millage rate. It's been 80 years, so it remained the same for about 6 years. Then when we introduced the library tax, which unfortunately is not a separate tax because we don't have a special taxing district for that, so that's built into our operating millage rate. So as it stands today, and what's being proposed in this budget is the operating portion is 5.7366, and what we call the library tax remains the same at 0.2840. Now here, I'll try to give you a rundown of each department, just maybe highlighting what some of the changes are by department. It's just an overview. So basically for the mayor and council, minimal, about $2,000 in additional public relations cost for the council and $2,500 for the mayor. For the city attorney, the amount remains the same, although there is a change in the way that it's structured. I guess, manager, do you want to speak on that, or?
Yes, there is a discussion going on between the city administration and the city attorney's office. Our proposal is to see the likelihood and possibility of creating on-site representation from the city attorney's office instead of being on call. That will help to streamline processes. One of the major plank of this administration is to engage in robust process improvement. Instead of electronically engaging a city attorney's office with all the likelihood of cybersecurity issues, we want to have representation on site. So that would be a major change in process improvement, to have the city attorney's office either designate an individual to be on site as part of that contract, which will just be a rewrite of what we have existing, or if they choose to perhaps take a different route to it, they were open to conversation. Now, the individual that's going to be on site is specifically going to be focused on general counsel type of work, review of documentation, legislation, all those kind of daily chores that an attorney does. And also it creates what I consider one of the finest points of process improvement. If you look at the current invoicing process we have in place, the city attorney's office invoices on individual items, emails, meetings. So we don't want to get into the weeds. We want to have a lump sum. City attorney's office, general counsel items. Maybe, let's say, X number of dollars. However they choose to get paid, they have divided equally into 12. Every month you just collect 1/12 of it. Instead of sending me an invoice every day that I read 12 emails. 3 goes to tax, 3 goes to the police, and we have to send those invoices to the respective departments to confirm that this happened. I think that's not an efficient way of doing business. We should have absolute trust in our city attorneys that when they bill us, it's representative of the services they render. By taking them out of that process of giving me detailed, up to 9th degree of what I did, I don't expect at his level to tell me he read 5 emails last week. Just take it on a higher level, lump sum. Let's say $250,000 a year, general counsel work. That covers everything that has to do with general counsel. I think that's the best way to do it, and that's the way most cities have done business. Then litigation. Any other specialized work is considered special project, and they bill you on time and material basis, just like they're doing today. If they spend 12 work hours, they bill us 12 work hours, just like they're doing today. But anything that has to do with reading emails, reviewing legislation, reviewing agreements, those are general counsel work. Just pay them a lump sum, and that's all it. He doesn't have to sit back and start taking a plain sheet of paper trying to itemize what he's doing. Every day he does that. Then at the end of the month, he compiles and gives to us to review. That's totally inefficient. So these are some of the process improvement we are having a conversation. It has not been finalized which way to go. So we are still talking to the city attorney's office on how best to deliver that. If they choose to do the lump sum approach, they will designate a deputy city attorney that comes to work in the building on a daily basis. If they say they don't want to do that, they want to take that part out of their business model, then the city can hire a deputy city attorney and place it in house to do that aspect of the work. So this is a conversation that's ongoing.
Can I just point something out based on this form?
Yes, sir.
The attorney took a huge cut in pay. It's $1,000.
Not $1,000. Well, I think that's a type. She didn't even see his money disappear.
Thank you.
But he didn't complain.
He didn't complain. He lost it, man. No, one of the.
Thanks for the catch.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to recognize that they are doing a great job for the let's take out some of this additional burden of trying to watch themselves as to how many hours they spend here. I think no attorney office should be doing that. But if you choose to have yourself a timepiece to clock yourself as you come in, you clock yourself out. But I don't think it's necessary to do that, right?
I'm happy to go to a fixed fee, and we're working through it depending on the demands, and we can staff somebody. I've already been working on it internally, and we'll provide some options on, who would be the best fit to be here on a regular basis.
Moving on, the city manager's slight increase, it's, about $13,000 for information technology. For the city clerk, we have this every other year, or every year, the elections cost, it goes up or it comes out. So that's pretty standard. Otherwise, there wasn't much change in the city clerk's office. For the building, there's an increase in professional services, $129,000, and that's predominantly $50,000 for inspection services, another $50,000 for a structural plan reviewer. Then there's one position that's proposed to be funded from the CRA. It's like another concierge or homeowner, small business individual. For the planning and zoning, basically
Just 1 second.
Yes.
The CRA will, based on my conversation with the office this afternoon, will increase that position count from 1 to 2 because I've tasked them to have an internal budget position in the CRA. As we speak, that office does not have any one individual that prepares the budget, manages the budget, and oversees the budget. So I've asked them to create a position that will be solely responsible. We're talking about a more than $10 million organization that has no individual overseeing its budget. So I've asked them this afternoon to increase their position count to create that for process improvement. Go ahead, sorry.
And as I do this, if some of you are doing the math and I'm mentioning certain things and you're thinking there's still a delta, part of what I'm not mentioning is there's an increase. Remember, most of our budgets are personnel, and as the manager had mentioned, our personnel costs have gone up. There's something in there. So if I don't mention it, that's what that delta is. For planning and zoning, $67,000 in professional services, and that includes $50,000 for an arborist. And then there's $12,000 for a subscription for the arts and public places. For finance and budget, I get to call ourselves out. The increase is pretty significant. As the manager had said, it's for a new assistant budget director. And then we also have some increases in travel and training. We have a lot of new staff. My entire department is relatively new. Then we have some increases for subscription-based technology items of about $18,000, and then professional services of $150,000, one of which includes a cost allocation study. For years, what the utilities pay to the general fund for like our service and everything, we've been basing it on a 2005 study, and every year we would just increase it by about 3%, close to the index. And rightfully so, I've gotten complaints from the electric utility director, from the public works director, that they feel that they're paying way too much. Now, that's a double-edged sword, because if it comes out true that they shouldn't be paying as much, that's a lost revenue to the city. But it's the right thing to do. So that's one of the studies that we have in there to do that cost allocation. And also the same thing for customer service, how we allocate that among the 4 utilities that pay for those services. What's the right mix? You know, is it based on their budget? Is it based on uses? Is it based on calls? It's not an easy thing to do.
And if I can add one more thing to the cost allocation study, it's going to line up with the manager's initiative for grants, because that will allow us to leverage the indirect costs on federal awards and not have to provide additional match dollars, because the indirect cost in and of itself would be considered your match. So no additional dollars and a savings to the city.
Procurement is next. There's a new buyer position and also some funds for a contract PEP or a bids administrator. They also have an increase in property insurance of about $19,000, And they also have another $25,000 set aside for OpenGov training, which is their new platform for contract management. For innovation and technology, we like to call it the Do It team. There's a new position of an IT support analyst. There's also a conversion of an existing position that they had to an assistant director. The phones that used to be paid for in the general administration department has now been moved to IT. That's about $96,000. They have professional service increases of about $51,000. A lot of that has to do with a lot of CrowdStrike. I know that's like for Thank you. Thank you. So they have a significant amount of money set aside for that and a lot of other contracts that they have. Okay, so the next one, here's where the fun begins. General administration. So you see that it has a reduction of about $373,000. But behind the scenes, we transferred out facilities division. We transferred out about $911,000 that was in the general administration, what we call the non-departmental. Those were identified as facilities costs, predominantly for city hall, utilities, repairs, contracts for the AC contract. So all those $911,000 was transferred to the new facilities division under general services. Another $264,000 was taken out of there and into the new division for the Office of Communications. Two things that are budgeted in this division are the pension and firefighters tax. So basically, we get the premium tax monies from the state. We have to report them as a revenue, but then we have to turn around and report it as an expenditure when we send it to the pension plan. And those were significant for the police. It was $366,000. Yes, no, I'm sorry. For fire, it was $366,000. For police, it was $175,000. There's an increase for some professional services. There's $85,000 for the strategic plan that the manager had pointed out, basically to have a facilitator to assist us with developing that. There's some SABITAs, we call SABITAs, it's subscription-based information technology costs. $13,000 for Fix-It. The Quality payment that we spoke about, that debt service cost, is in there. Special events, actually that was a decrease of $49,000. There were some increases to some existing ones, but the main decrease was it was $80,000 that was being carried for a New Year's Eve event that's been scrapped. And then Wings Over Homestead, which is every other year we increase the contribution for that by $20,000. And Career Source, that was taken out of there, and it is now going to be housed in the HR department. Okay, so now, the other three are the community divisions. The community, okay. So now on the next page, these are all the ones that didn't have anything last year because they're all new divisions. So, new division, 1840 Community Development Division. Basically, all this has is $80,000 for consulting fees for somebody to come in here. One of the things that they're going to be looking at too is housing. Since we're going to have the home fund and possibly go after SHIP funds, to have somebody that's going to be responsible for that. The next division is the Office of Communication, Public Information Office. This was, again, broken out. It used to be housed in the General Administration. And it also has for a new officer of communications, and there were really no other increases to the operations. And then the third division is the Office of Grants Administration, which the manager spoke about at length. This does include two new positions, a grants facilitator and a grants manager. No real increase in the operating expense. And it does have $25,000 set aside for eCivic, which is a grants management software. Anybody tired yet? Okay.
Let me jump in. Maybe a moment of levity, a moment of somber reflection. As some of you have heard me say it before, we got a lot of newcomers. It's been 50 years since Homestead had its own fire department, and the pension obligation is still over $300,000 a year. So extrapolate that to all of our other ongoing pensions. It will outlive all of us by centuries.
Mayor, the amount that we talked about though, that's premium tax money. That's coming from the state. That's not.
I know. The fact of the matter is that that's illustrative of how expensive it is, even when there's been no one in the plan for 50 years.
Correct. Okay, General Services Department. This has been a resurrected department. And the only thing in there is really a new director, but under this department, there's going to be 3 divisions. The 3 divisions are facilities maintenance, Seminole Theater operations, and Cyberarium operations. And as the manager said, these basically were previously all housed under parks. So that's why parks are going to see a big increase. And all these costs are predominantly transfers from what was there, maybe with some slight increases in operation, but for the most part, it's just transfers from what was in the parks division. In the facilities maintenance, in addition to the division that came over from parks, as I mentioned earlier, from general administration, the costs that were there for the facilities for new city hall, those are now being housed in here in this division. Human resources. Basically, they have a compensation and benefits study, and they also have the NeilGov tracking software, which I believe went to council recently. That's going to be for tracking new applicants and keeping track of that. So that's going to bring us forward. They also have a slight increase for some of the events that they have for the employees of about $12,000, and a small increase for employee testing, and $50,000 for the career source that will now be housed there. It came over from general administration. Okay, for the police. So the police, you see a decrease. Part of it is the transfer of approximately $1.8 million for the NEED code department, that even though it was created during 2024, from a budgetary standpoint, everything was left in the police. The year that we break it out as a separate component during this budget. The other biggest increase in the police department by itself is there's going to be an addition of 5 sworn police officers, which is going to be offset by a COPS grant. There's an addition of 3 civilians, and then they have the shot spotter, which was formerly funded by a grant, so that's an impact of about $210,000 that's now shifting over to the general fund, and the same thing with the body camera. It's an impact of about $236,000 because, again, the grant for that one ended. So the impact is over on the general fund. And then they have another big increase, is about $152,000 for a Pro Phoenix software. Not sure what it does, but I'm sorry? No? Yeah, sorry.
So I think the bottom line is, with the transfer out of code compliance, out of police, there was a dip of about $1.8 million. Then it got picked up additional revenue being put into police to bring it up again. So it couldn't, that's why you have a minor reduction, even though there was a major reduction. So as we were taking money out, we were putting money in to fund those additional initiatives.
For code?
And in addition to that, I think we are funding a new position in the police department to oversee grants. I think there's a position for grants in the PD as well, as part of this money. So
Separate from that other grant position?
yes, separately, yeah, because we need to have somebody in-house there to help them. These are cops. They don't want cops to worry about money. So they need somebody to sit down in the office and look after the safe.
The next one's code compliance. Again, didn't exist as a separate department. That's transferred from from the police department, and it also does include the new director position and also an upgrade to an existing code officer position. Next one's Public Works, which includes streets and includes project management. That one is predominantly funded by the local option gas tax of about $1.4 million. The only thing of interest there is that the position that was there was eliminated. It's converted to create another position in Public Works, and then we've put aside $100,000 for consulting, which is going to be used like for a CIP manager until the city decides whether we should hire a full-time position for that. Parks and Recreation, or I should say Parks and Recreation Open Spaces Growth. Basically, again, this shows a huge reduction because of the transfer out of the facilities, the Seminole Theater, and the Cybrarium. And on top of that, they have an slight increase to events of about $15,000, an increase in repair costs for $104,000, supplies increase of about $104,000, and utilities increase of about $115,000. And also, they will be getting, not reflected in this amount, but they'll be getting 5 part-timers, which will be added to their budget. And then the last 3 items, there was no transfer to solid waste. Obviously, that's something that occurred in the previous year, it didn't occur here. So we have the $400,000 that we do every year that goes toward the PPP bonds. And then the transfer to the CIP fund, as we said, mostly for the smaller departments. When they ask for capital needs, we budgeted in the capital improvement fund, and then we do the transfer from the general fund over to the capital improvement fund. So currently, this $79,000, what that represents is to cover some items that were leased equipment financed. There may be a slight increase to that depending on what we finalize with the CIP projects. Okay. That's it for the general fund. Any questions on the general fund before I move into utilities? Hearing none. All right, moving on. Okay. So, electric utilities basically leaving there, they had a reduction, and that's predominantly because of reductions in the purchase power costs with fuel coming down. There's also a related PCA rate that was lowered. Now, the reason the budget also shows the size it does, we're still showing a reappropriation of FMPA loan proceeds. Some loans that we had gone for, there's still some projects that are yet to be completed, so those funds remain in play, so we reappropriate them and include them in their budget for next year. But overall, it showed a decrease predominantly because of the purchase power cost. The next one that you see on there is, the next one is the debt service aspect of the electric utility, and the only reason that was increased is the new bank loan that we'll be bringing forward to council in the next couple of weeks. Will be changed. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. For electric utility, one of the things that the budget also includes is it will include $4.2 million in capital improvement funds. That'll be partially funded with a transfer from the R&I fund of about for the water and sewer utility, basically it reflects the increase, as we said, in the CPI, 4.57% of the rate, and the pass-through rate is at 0.2613, and it will be taking on $879,000 in CIPs. The stormwater utility will be taking on $96,000 in projects, CIPs, and the main difference between last year's and this year was the 6th Avenue drainage project, which was basically funded in '24. The project is still ongoing, but that'll roll over. If anything, it will come to you in November if we have any rollover of funds that were unused. And they do have, it includes $200,000 for a master plan, which will be partially funded from the CRA budget. Solid waste basically has an increase also in the rate from 4.57% based on the CPI, and they will be taking on CIPs of 900 and 1,188. Nothing else major in there for the utilities. Any questions on the utilities? Okay, the next one's impact fee funds. The biggest increase between 24 and 25 is in 24 when we budgeted, we weren't anticipating that we were going to be getting that much in impact fees. The result is we did get more than we had budgeted for, and for 25, the expectation is that we're going to get a lot more. So that's why that number is so huge. Most of that is for Parks and Recreation. And we'll talk about it when we look at the CIP, what's going to be budgeted there. Yes.
And the impact fee number is based obviously on the current, as part of some of our other directions to management, we've asked for an impact fee study.
Yes, correct.
And there may be some growth in that.
That's correct.
As a result of recommendation.
Absolutely.
So if I may, the preliminary report of the impact fee study has been submitted, and we are hoping to have a coordination meeting to take a deep dive as to the study and see what we can do. So I should hope to come to council maybe the next couple of months to finalize.
For confiscated property, that's basically forfeitures. You can't budget any revenues coming in. We can only budget based on funds that are in existence. funds that are in existence, and it's actually divided into like 3 or 4 divisions. Some for Treasury, some for Justice, another one for State. So each one has their own limitations. There are some projects and operating costs that are budgeted out of there. There may be some monies that are set aside in contingency until they determine what else they want to do with those funds. Disaster Relief Fund, the manager and I will have a discussion on this further that eventually he'll speak to council about. We're trying to wrap up the Irma, closing out Irma and what that entails. So we're at the stretch. We're at the stretch. Yes, exactly. The CRA, the manager said that I think we're getting that one, but the only thing I want to say is similar to PTP, which is really the next one. Those 2 funds, again, those are funds that you actually want to spend the money. And the money that you get, you want to spend it. So the key is that we want to identify any funds that are unspent in the prior year, so we make sure that we can reappropriate it and they can spend it in this year. So moving to the People's Transportation.
On the CRA, there are some hefty amounts of money in the budget that I've asked the CRA to funnel towards capital improvements within the CRA area. Can't just be carrying money over. And I understand that commercial improvement of buildings is great, but the infrastructure that services the business is there. It's missing. We have the wastewater system there that is in bad shape. The water distribution system is not in top notch within the CRA, and we are more focused on facade improvements of buildings and stuff. So we need to strike a balance, do an infrastructure improvement program, just like it's done in all cities. Let the CRA fund their infrastructure, and it will help businesses to come. The doctor's office can't open there if there is no sewer allocation available. So these are some of the reprioritization that I've tasked the CRA to focus on. Thank you.
So again, with PTP funds, it's $10 million budget, and currently they're showing like $3 million in contingency, but as you'll see in the CIP plan, there's over $2 million in projects that are scheduled, so that will be introduced in place of the contingency that's there. Multimodal fund we spoke about earlier, that's been closed out. In there, the capital improvement fund, The reason that last year was so high is because, again, we had that $2.8 million from the county's 5.7 that was used to fund $2.8 million worth of CIP requests from the general fund partners. In the current year, in the proposed, what's currently there now is predominantly the money that the manager mentioned from the savings of the some of the projects with Parks and Rec, predominantly 2 roofs, that there was significant savings. That's pretty much what's there, and it's going to be used for some of the projects that Parks and Recreation has requested in the CIP plan. Librarian, the money that's in there is predominantly the money that's been coming from the CRA that's been generated from the library tax. So I don't know if you recall, but when we first introduced the library tax, the intent was the CRA was getting a portion of that. We wanted to see if we could get it back. And what we were doing is we were putting it back into Seminole Theater, Librarian operations. So we were told we couldn't do that. So basically we're putting it into capital. It has to be for capital purposes. So we're putting it into Librarian capital project. So it's, I think it's about $164,000 for this year. So every year we hope to do that. We'll build it up, and again, it can be used towards some of the improvements that we want to do for the third and fourth floor. Okay. The next 3 are debt service. So again, there's really no change in those 3. Customer service has an increase. Predominantly, there's a conversion of 3 positions that they had. They had 8 contract temps. The manager, we looked at it and we agreed to have 3 of them converted to full-time. In addition to those conversions, they have the ENCO contract, which I'm sure you guys, I think that went to council. It's a significant increase. I know the city's going to be putting out for an RFP to try to see if they can get somebody else, but for now we have to go with the contract we have. So that's why it shows a significant increase in customer service. Fleet maintenance, fleet management, not much of it. The reason that they have a decrease is because they had some capital projects funded last year. There's no capital projects funded in this year. Self-insurance, which is predominantly the property insurance increases. We had property insurance premium increases, so that's reflected there. Workers' comp, no change, but I do have to give credit to Baltimore, who looked at the rates and restructured and made them more in line with what the currents are. And what I mean by the rates is what each position is categorized as far as, are you more subject to having a workers' comp claim? The rates that we were using before had the old thinking of solid waste workers that were riding in back of trucks, which is no longer the case. You have the one-armed bandits, so they're no longer qualified as being, having a heavier rating charged to them. So we realigned that, so that changed. So even though overall the amount of money that we expect to get or need for workers' comp, we kept it the same, it's really a realignment among all the departments and what those positions are now paying into the workers' comp as a result of that.
Every department had a savings.
Next one's the health insurance, and again, that's because the health insurance premium went up. And the last one is the utility R&I. Last year we had $1.5 million that was slated to go into electric utility if they still needed it for the capital project. They didn't use it. This year we're funding basically $500,000 if they need it. That's basically included in their electric utility budget. That kind of wraps it up.
Yep. So you want to go to the important dates to remember. So our first public hearing is going to be on Tuesday, September 3rd at 5:30 p.m., which is to approve the tentative millage rates and the proposed budget. Prior to that date, just like I said earlier, we would love to sit down with each council member, because I'm sure you have follow-up questions, and that you'd love to go back and read through the documents that we provided, and you probably have additional comments to make. And we are open and available to consider all recommendations. I know where your pet ideas are. We are open to all challenges, and so that we can get this to the finish line on September 3rd for the first public hearing. And the second public hearing is going to be on September 18th, which is the final public hearing at 5:01 p.m., which will adopt the millage rates and the budget. I believe sometime in October, once the county and the state have finalized the millage rate, we'll come back again to council to have another bite on the apple. Because of that $2.4 million thing, which I keep telling my colleagues, they gave us a check under the understanding that we should not cash the check. So we're going to make sure that we don't cash the $2.4 million.
And the manager makes a very good point, because we're budgeting as if that money's coming in, and we also have an expense. We want to make sure we come back to council and do the budget amendments to remove it, because otherwise, when you get the monthly report, you're going to see a huge variance that really doesn't exist. So that's the main reason for doing it.
Any questions?
And the check to the council will be divided by 7.
Before I open it up to questions, I got a couple of comments and questions. I'll open it to council. I just want to thank our city manager and his staff. This is the most comprehensive, understandable, visionary budget that I've ever seen in my, I guess I've been through 10 budget cycles. Yeah, 10 budget cycles now. This is taking this process and the future, as they say, to a whole new level. I want to thank everyone in this room whose hands thus far have been in this budget. This is just a whole new role, a whole new level of presentation. So with that, I'd like to open it up to my elected colleagues with any general comments or questions that we all may want to consider, or send staff back. Yeah. Preliminary drawing board, before we have those one-on-one briefings. Councilwoman Oliver.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, our city manager. You did a great job, and our team, Carlos and Oliver, you did fantastic. I wanted to share my content to see the city parks and open spaces being laser focused on our parks and open spaces, and that the maintenance of the facilities is going to have proper. That I really like. I'm happy to see the additional police officers, of course, and the focus on improving our process with development services. So that is for me, reasons to celebrate here. I would just like to take some time, Gary, when we do our drive around, if we can have a visit at the motor yard, take a look at the conditions of the guys working on the trucks and the vehicles there. I recall years ago, and maybe it's improved since then, but I recall there being just the conditions, the heat in there can get pretty intense, and so I want to make sure that we check off the visit, and that if there's anything we need to improve, that we do so. And you mentioned in your opening statement there is sidewalks. I think that's very important, and that we can connect our community through improving the sidewalks throughout the district. So I look forward to that. And as well, the development of a more global, multicultural programming department or position that can oversee those programs and special activities in our city. So I think for now I'll rest, and I'm sure I'll have more to discuss in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman. Davis?
Again, thank you for a very intelligent and very concise, very complex matter. Put forward in a very well thought out manner. One thing of particular note, I have complete agreement with my colleagues. One additional factor: grants are not magic, right? And by having people who specialize in grants, that's how you get grants. And so, thank you very much to see a special emphasis on that, because that money is out there. And thank you very much for looking forward to how we should be 50 years from now. Very well done. Thank you.
I'm fine. Very proud of the city manager, the presentation that he made in the finance department. Thank you for everything. I'll be expecting a special meeting with him probably this coming week.
Thank you. So, I'm still a little miffed at what the county did to us. And I'm not quite sure how we can protect ourselves in the future when we set our budget and our millage rates, and then we get taxed $2.5 million. You know, I don't know how that's even possible when I start thinking about the 5 police officers that were proffered. It could have been 6 or 7. And when I think about QRT, and what department does QRT fall under?
It's going to be moved from Parks and Recreation to Public Works, which is the natural home for that. I'll tell you why. The very first week I got to Homestead, I saw folks who were trying to patch potholes with cold patch. I'm like, wow, this is temporary. This is something you do to fix the pothole for only 24 hours.
Yeah.
But it appears it was a preferred method of repair, so I kind of engaged the folks. I realized that from Parks. I said, wait, what are you doing here? So, based on charter and law, the public right of way is under the purview of the Director of Public Works. To have somebody from Parks fixing the roadway, if somebody gets into an accident.
Not only that, taking branches out of the way and everything.
So if somebody gets into an accident, you're not going to subpoena Pedro to go testify about that because he's not a subject matter expert of what he was doing. It should be the licensed professional engineer, Cairo. He should be sitting in the dock explaining what happened there and how to fix it. So as part of the process improvement, we moved QRT back to Public Works. But why we call parks, recreation, and open spaces is that tree trimming will reside in parks so that we don't duplicate efforts buying 2 sets of equipment, one for parks, one for public works. We don't have the leisure and the money, which is what one good thing the county did. They called it pros. The open spaces is for parks, we're in charge of parks, tree trimming, open spaces like the plaza here, and along the corridors. But they're not doing it themselves. They are actually overseeing a contract of Brightview. So it makes more sense to centralize that aspect of it. Anything that has to do with the infrastructure on the street, like potholes, I give it to this guy. So that if somebody sues me, the city, Cairo, it's on you. You got to explain it.
And I really like that because like our parks and open spaces, we focus on making sure we look beautiful and that when people come to visit,
Yeah.
we play, and the teams from Upper Manhattan come down. Our parks look different.
And the reason I brought that up with the county was the city's starting to look better. But I think we need to add QRT or at least another team of QRT to cover more areas in the city. I think it needs to focus more on the northwest side and the open communities versus the gated communities on the east side, except for the villages, which is not a gated community area except for Lakeshore. So I just wish in the future that we have a provision that the county, when they give us the numbers, those have to be set in stone because we haven't been able to, we're not going to be able to adjust our millage rate up if we need to. I don't think we need to. I think what we see here is another good balanced budget again that is in the works. But I think that extra $2.5 million would have benefited the city in a large way. And so I don't know why that happens, how it happens, but somehow we have to figure out. We're all excited we're going to get a little extra money, and now we're getting it taken away from us. So, and parks too could have been improved, right? I mean, we're still trying to build a huge park out east, a regional park at the old sports complex. So that money could have gone a long way there too.
So the county's property appraisal office has volunteered to come to address the city council if we wish to explain what happened. Because we told him point blank, the residents of Homestead deserve an explanation.
No, it's a big number.
Yeah.
And I think that, over the next couple of years, as development comes back online, and all the development's gonna even increase our general fund even more. So, there's gonna be opportunities to bring in more police officers. There's gonna be more opportunity to bring in, the QRT guys to continue to help keep, you know, the city going in the direction it's going in. So that was just my 2 cents. We're gonna have more time to talk about this.
You just reminded me of something, Councilman. Are you still using those contractors as for help with cleaning in the park?
Oh, yes, we have.
Yeah.
And so that's
So
gonna
we have 2
continue
types.
on? But sometimes they don't know, sometimes it's not really reliable, and I just wanna make sure we're not being too dependent on that.
And I used to see them all the time. I haven't seen.
I haven't
crew
seen
in a
them
long
around,
time.
so.
I saw them last week.
Inmate crew?
We had 2 crews
Yeah.
of our staff that switched up to inmates. However, I believe it was either last fiscal year or the fiscal year before, where we removed the funding for the crews that we used to pay for, and we hired 2 staff as labor ones to be our pressure cleaning crew, which I'm sure you've seen. Right now, it's 2 girls, our pressure cleaning ladies, so they're usually out here every Monday morning in the plaza. They just finished from Avenue last week to do all our parts.
Thank you. Yeah, just take a look at that so we can make sure.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I too want to thank the manager and staff for what they've provided us so far. I do have some deeper dive questions that I want to get into. One being is, I want to see the details. I like the devil's in the details. I like to look at the numbers. That's where I get my data from. That allows me to make a more educated decision on what we're doing. Also, I'd like to know how many new employees are we bringing on for last year? Again, I don't need the answer today, but something to think about. And I'm going to ask this question again, and this will be the 5th time I've asked the question, but how much money do we have in our emergency reserve fund?
How much what?
Money do we have in our emergency reserve fund?
And it's what we call the general fund balance.
That's correct.
Which has several components. I mean, if you look at the financial statements that we issued, on 9/30/23, the total fund balance is,
As of September 30th, 2023, $61,202,000.
but don't get excited because 30 million of that is non-spendable. It has to do with the new market tax credit and the loans between them. But the rest of it is basically whatever.
So if that comes, if we have some overruns or things of that nature, we have that we could dip into if needed.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to, but we.
Like
have that
31?
there.
It's $19.1 million unrestricted.
Okay. Perfect.
But the rest of it is committed, assigned, or
$19 million.
And yeah, the rest is dedicated reserves for our debt service.
A word of caution that really should only be used for like one-time things. You don't
Right.
want to rely on
Yeah,
that.
it's not a
to
reliable,
cover recurring
absolutely
expenditures.
understood.
And had a discussion with the manager, I don't know if you recall, a few years back, we gave $1.8 million back to water and sewer.
Mm-hmm.
Last few years, we gave back close to $3 million to solid waste. The next one in line is electric utility. They contributed a lot during 2012 and 2017. The city didn't want to raise taxes and was using some of the reserves or contributions from those plans. So we want to make sure that some of that fund balance is eventually given back to them.
So,
Can I take it back?
Mr. Finance, my recommendation is for us to prepare a memo that details the fund balance,
Okay.
status, and what is unrestricted and what is dedicated for specific uses, and share with council members prior before we meet with each of them so that they have a good grasp.
I can also add that our Oxford book is
Yeah.
delivered today, the printed version, so all of you will likely have a copy tomorrow. Sent out
Thank you.
for all of you, okay?
Actually, read that.
And that very important number is on page 28.
Yeah.
Which page?
28.
So in the spirit of transparency, we play the cards open and off so that everybody knows what's in the city in order to manage expectations.
Thank you, Jerry. And, Vice Mayor, you, bringing up several items and then leading into conversation with the utility. When we went to the conference with SMEA and PA and all the other acronyms, protecting our grid and our stations is really important. And I don't know how much farther we want to be with protecting the grid, but that's something I would like for us to focus on.
One thing I can add to that, Councilwoman, this budget, and I know Carlos might have not gotten a chance to mention that, but there were conversions, 5 positions that are currently temporary.
Okay.
In the proposed budget, it is being proposed to be
Permanent?
full-time permanent positions.
Perfect, very good.
Those positions are the electric substation engineer, administrative assistant, and associate customer project liaison, and 2 journeyman electricians.
And also just physical
Hardening.
hardening, correct.
That was a big topic of conversation.
And my last comment is basically, you know, I would like to hear what every department wanted. You know, everybody's gonna get something, but what did every department want when it comes to manpower, when it comes to equipment? Where did we fall short, or were we able to make some gains in other areas in order to make that happen? So we can have those discussions offline.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. All right, so, yeah, this is budget time. We have competing interests. We have the projects and desires of elected officials, the actual real-world needs that the manager espouses, and somewhere in there, answering to our taxpayers in the form of millage rates. Now, looking at the chart, Carlos, I think generally it looks like starting for fiscal year 22, we've generally had a millage rate reduction of 1%. Not 1 percentage point, but 1%.
Last year was 2%.
Last year, okay. But starting in 22, so the 23, well, for the 21 budget discussions, 22, 23, and now. And, you know, bearing in mind, let's think about it. I mean, I think we're all disappointed that we did not have that 19% increase. That 12% increase, pretty healthy also. And, you know, I think we've turned the corner, starting to turn the corner, a long way in ferreting out waste and finding better efficiency. I won't put him on the spot now, but I know the manager has identified a lot of contracts and monthly payments that were going out the door that were necessary. Who were these people? What were they providing for those amounts? And that's been just, look, money's money, and that was not an insignificant fine. So I'm confident we're going to be able to do that. So I say that to say that I think we can strike that balance to providing what we need to provide in the budget and drive toward that rate reduction, whether it be 1 or 2 or somewhere between 0 and 2. Let's endeavor to do that because we still have 12% increase to work with. Seemingly, you know, at its position, solid waste is, you know, we've come a long way. We plugged a big hole, I think, when we started charging the solid waste fees on the tax bill. So when tenants bailed out and left us hanging with unpaid utility bills, the garbage bills didn't get paid either. And we have remedied a large portion of that. We've adjusted the rates appropriately after decades. So I'll try to make this fast. We've all been told time and time again that in terms of code enforcement, there's constitutional and statutory protection against our enforcement against what we would call excessive occupancies. Right? It's 12 cars in the front yard of a duplex. Not all family members there on vacation. Yeah, minimum housing standards is another discussion for another day. Oh, I see our code guy, oh, here he goes, but anyway. Just kind of put this in our minds. Our rates are based on, I'm assuming, an average household output of trash. Okay, yeah, my 4-bedroom house probably puts out half of what a 4-bedroom house would be expected to put out. There's a lot of little houses, mostly outside of HOAs, that are over-occupied. And we are subsidizing that extra trash. If we can't address the over-occupancy, and the first thing that comes to my mind is maybe a surcharge. I don't know how, yeah, that's what I mean. Code enforcement solid waste and the attorneys, but again, none of us here who live our lives should be subsidizing usually out-of-town landlords who have excess occupancy in these units. It's more trash, it fills up our trucks, it's all the time. You know where I'm going with that. Just, you know, gotta be some better ways to skin some cats. We also talked about perhaps excluding some of the new areas from providing solid waste service. There are thousands of potential new residents who don't have an expectation of that city service, but perhaps come from somewhere where it's a private hauler, and perhaps we could even collect a franchise fee. You know, as we're in budget time, let's think about enacting that kind of legislation that kind of creates a finite customer pool, that we're not going to have to do those costly acquisitions for additional trucks and additional crews, because contrary to what you read on all these social media posts, all these new houses don't produce the millions and millions of dollars that people think they do. And it's just let's find some solutions to plug those holes. And I'll beat the drum I beat my entire life on this council as mayor. Unless somebody convinces me otherwise, it doesn't appear that the Seminole Theater has been able to become more self-sustaining. We've got to ask the hard question and decide whether or not I'm not talking about the operational agreement, the management agreement. I'm talking about our subsidizing of utilities and repairs to the tune of the coming year of $550,000. Is that reasonable? What are we going to do? I think that's a conversation we're going to need to have as to whether, you know, we've got to become more self-sustaining. I don't know what the issue is there, but I think that's something we're going to need to look at. And I'll just throw this final Molotov cocktail out there. We're in contract season. Health coverage has gone up $1.5 million in 2 years. Yet none of us are paying one penny more than anybody was paying 4 years ago, 5 years ago, or more. Just like solid waste, just like impact fees. We have to take a good faith look at that. I mean, there are a lot of folks in this community who pay a lot more for less coverage or can't afford coverage. And that's a pretty good plan. And aren't many people underpaid here, and we're going to have to decide, make a policy decision as to whether or not we're going to ask folks to chip in. So with that, I'm confident that each of us are probably going to have a couple hours with the manager and his staff, and we'll be back at it September 3rd in public anyway. Mr. Manager?
So I want to take this opportunity to recognize some of the sacrifices that my staff have made in the last 2 weeks to put this excellent budget together. Starting with my Assistant City Manager, Kimar Brown, of course, the Finance Director and his team, and my associates in the City Manager's office and elsewhere, and the directors. There were a lot of sleepless nights. Folks were in this building till 1 a.m. in the morning, even on Saturdays and weekends and on a weekday. I was getting emails at 11 p.m. some days when I stepped out, some days at midnight, and somebody comes out of an office thinking he or she was alone in the building, or somebody getting coffee. So guys, my colleagues, I call everyone my colleagues, all team, you guys have done well. I really appreciate you. And thank you guys. We'll do better moving forward as a team.
No criticism from any of us.
Yeah, believe it.
Thank you guys. I really
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, if that's all, then I'll leave this meeting adjourned.
Thank you. I got a job lunch.
I heard, I was like, look.